The movie begins in what looks like a rundown house with strange symbols drawn over the inside walls. A mad-looking man with fear in his eyes draws a protective circle with ash around him. Before he could complete the circle though, something from the corner of the room drags his book of incantations away. The man hurries to draw the last of the circle as an elderly woman with an IV drip comes into the room. She looked really distressed and tells him to stop because he was hurting them. But unwilling to listen to the old lady, the man starts reading the spell out loud, and when he looks up, the lady has disappeared. As he kept reading, the ink on the pages starts to seep away, and from the other side of the room, a pale-looking girl appears and asks him what he's doing. She then tells him that he knows what would happen if she doesn't feed, and the frightened old man knows that the girl that was standing in front of him wasn't real. But the girl still taunts him with the idea of seeing his wife again, and the man is adamant about not feeding her despite her promises. The girl then carelessly tells him to stay in his circle because she could find others to do her bidding and leaves. Yasuva, giving up on seeing his wife again, walks out of the protective circle, and suddenly black smoke enters him and changes his eyes dark. Yasuva then stabs himself, ending the possession and killing himself in the process. In a different part of the city, a couple, Art and Claire, sit inside their car watching a house. Claire is anxious about meeting her estranged father-in-law, but Art tries to convince her that the man had changed. The couple then walks into a funeral home where Jack's father, a rabbi, was giving a sermon. After the ceremony was over, Art embraces his father, and he then hugs his daughter-in-law, surprising her with the affectionate act. Later, the family gathers to have dinner, and Claire tells the old man that they were having a daughter. Suddenly, Art gets a message on his phone, and he seems quite upset by it. He excuses himself from the table to deal with it, while Saul apologizes to Claire for treating her poorly in the past. And Claire continues to be nice and accepts his apology, and tells him that what matters now is that they're together. Across the room, Claire sees a picture of a little girl and asks the rabbi what happened to her. Saul tells her that the girl's name was Sarah and that she disappeared a little while ago. In the bathroom, Art makes a call to his business associate, who informs him that unless the contract follows through, the bank would repossess their house. Although upset by the news, Art returns to the table and continues their conversation like nothing had happened. After dinner, Saul was required to perform an embalming in a morgue and asks Art if he wants to join him. In the basement, they meet Haimesh and bring in the dead body. Saul opens the body bag and finds an old man who offed himself. Haimesh tells the rabbi that the man had killed himself after being obsessed with spellbooks and trying to contact his dead wife. After the prayer, Haimesh asks to speak to Saul in private, while Art stays behind to get started on the body. He uncovers the man's clothes and removes the knife that was still embedded in the man's chest, and while doing so, he finds an amulet around the man's neck and tries to get it off. And then suddenly, the dead man opens his eyes and the whole room becomes engulfed in darkness. Art drops the pendant, which breaks instantly, and fearing disappointing his father, he hides the broken pieces. Saul returns to the morgue to find his son standing in shock, and the body moves again, and Saul tells him to calm down and that the man is really dead, and that it's only because of rigor mortis that he's moving. He then goes on to tell his son to go upstairs and get some rest. As Art walks up the stairs, he thinks he hears something and looks around, when out of nowhere, he gets a splitting headache. After it passes, Art walks into his room and closes the door, and in the morning, Claire is woken up by a horrible nightmare. In his study, Saul examines the knife that the old man used to off himself, and on the wooden handle, he notices inscriptions and calls his friend to find out more about it. And his friend explains that the writing on the dagger was an ancient warding spell, and he goes on to tell Saul not to pay too much attention to it, as no one knows how to trap a demon anymore. Saul continues to dig deeper, so Chaim asks if he had found some type of pendant on the body, and Chaim explains that without a pendant, a demon could not be trapped in a body, so Saul has nothing to worry about. And feeling reassured, Saul hangs up the phone. Downstairs, Claire is photographing food for her blog when she sees something from the corner of her eyes. She uses her camera to see what it was in the room, and she notices that it picked up some sort of noise. She then puts it closer to her ear so she could listen better, but she's startled by a sudden scream that comes from it, and she drops the camera. Outside, Haimesh and Art receive another dead body, which they discover was Sarah, the young girl that disappeared months ago. While Art signs the papers, his phone that he had left in the car starts to ring, and Haimesh picks it up. On the other line was Art's business partner, who reveals that the only way they could get the bank loan is if they managed to put up his father's place as collateral. Haimesh, who was suspicious by the return of Art to his father, realizes that his assumptions were right. He confronts Art about his betrayal and hurries home to tell Saul about what his son was planning to do. He would then find Saul in the living room with Claire and yells the truth. Art tries to explain to his father, but Saul wouldn't listen, and upset, Art storms out of the room and starts packing their clothes. Claire hurries behind him and asks what was going on, and her husband explains that he hasn't been able to sell a house in over 2 years and that they were in financial trouble. Devastated by the news, Claire accuses him of lying to her and making her quit her job, promising that he would be able to provide for them. Claire then tells him to go down and apologize to his father because he would regret it if they left in a rush. But heartbroken, Saul had gone down to the basement to pray and think about his fight with his son, and suddenly, the morgue light starts to flicker and the main door swings open. At a distance, he sees the figure of something that looks like a monstrous goat-headed beast. Consumed with fear, he tries to run away, but finds out that the doors are locked. The next morning, Art wakes up and heads down to the morgue to speak with his father, but he finds Haimesh and the other rabbis gathered around Saul's dead body. Art is shocked by the sight and starts to cry, and Haimesh accuses Art of breaking his father's heart, which they assume is what led to his death. Art then asks the others to give him a minute with the body to mourn his loss, and at the wake, Haimesh starts to sing a mourning song and is joined by the other rabbis. And unable to handle the accusatory stares of everyone, Art hurries to his room, and while sitting on his bed, he hears a knock on his door. When he opens it, he sees something sticking on the door, and he becomes paralyzed, almost as if he was in a trance. In the living room, Claire tries to get something out of the fridge, but is startled by the ghost of a little girl. She runs up to the room to tell her husband, but she finds him frozen in their bedroom. She tries to speak to him, but he seems unable to respond and only tells her that he needs to sleep. That night, Art wakes up from his trance-like state in the living room after having a dream about carving some strange symbols on the floor. He then returns to his room and tells his wife that something was wrong with him, and Claire comforts him by holding him close as he cries. The next day, a couple of men arrive to take the body in the morgue and demand that there needs to be a police report because the man offed himself. The men explain that if they can't get the report, he would have to contact the next of kin. Art goes through the man's belongings and finds the location of his house. After driving to the apartment, he goes inside and finds the wrecked place filled with strange writings. When he looks around the place, he finds a recording the dead man had made about the demon that he summoned and how it was making him lose his mind. On a video that he found hidden on the floorboard, Art sees footage that the crazy man had made of the summoning. The man had assumed that he was summoning an archangel, but he'd been fooled by a demon. In the video, Art sees the man using Sarah in the summoning, but something goes terribly wrong and the child is killed by the demon. Back at the house, Claire is approached by an old woman who claims to be the wife of the dead man in the morgue. Confused, Claire calls her husband but is unable to reach him, and after a lot of begging, Claire allows the old lady to see her husband and they head to the basement. As soon as she shows the woman the body, Claire starts feeling a lot of pain in her abdomen, and the woman tells her that she's been cursed and that the only way to survive it is by burning the pendant. Finding the pendant, she uses a candle to burn the incantation that was trapping the demon. And immediately, the body in the morgue starts to burn and the old woman transforms into a goat-headed demon. Claire screams when she sees the frightening monster and runs away. Once she makes it upstairs, she tries to open the main door but finds it locked, and fearing for her life, Claire hides under the table and hopes that the demon doesn't find her. A few minutes later, as Claire was crouched under the table, she is startled by the demon. After watching the scary video, Art returns back to his house, but finds it looking wrecked. He finds his wife on the couch passed out after she's pointed out by Sarah's ghost. Panicked, he tries to wake her up and succeeds after a few tries, and he carries his wife out of the house, but as soon as his feet crosses the door's threshold, he's transported back to a few minutes ago. He tries to get Claire out once again, but the same thing just keeps happening. The demon, embodying Sarah, tells him that he wouldn't be able to leave or see his wife unless they make a deal. And Art then realizes that the demon wants him to get at a child and he refuses. A sudden flashing pain then grips his mind and disorients him for a few seconds. And when the pain subsides, he looks around and finds the demon gone. Scared for Claire and himself, Art calls Haimesh and begs him to come over. Haimesh immediately arrives at the house and is completely shocked by the state of the place. He shows him the footage that he found, which convinces Haimesh that he was telling the truth. Shocked by what he had seen, Haimesh suggests that they call Chaim, who happens to be an expert on such things. When he arrives, they show the sigil that had been drawn on the living room floor, and he explains that it was a sacrificial altar. The three men then head downstairs and find the ashes of the burned out body. Chaim then explains that the demon would do anything to get a child into the altar so it can kill it. And although the demon was bound thousands of years ago, it was freed by an unknowing old man. Chaim tells the man that the only way to defeat the beast was by trapping it using the pendant and a knife inside a human body. Art volunteers to sacrifice himself to save his wife and child, and Haimesh and Art head to the living room to start the ritual. But suddenly, the monster appears and attacks Haimesh, dragging him out of the room. Art, who was momentarily safe inside the ash circle, immediately starts chanting the spell. Fearing entrapment, the demon starts using Claire to threaten Art into doing what it says, and although he was scared of what he was seeing, Art knew that completing the spell was the only way to save her. He then completes the spell and immediately a dark smoke enters his mouth, turning his eyes completely black. While struggling with the demon inside, Art loses the special dagger that he needs to complete the ritual, and from the other side of the room, Haimesh drags himself to Art, and knowing that it was the only way to defeat the beast, stabs him in the heart. As Haimesh was over Art's dying body, he whispers to him that he should have stayed in the protective circle. Art then realizes that while he'd been struggling with the demon, the pendant had fallen from his neck, making the whole ritual useless. And from across the room, he sees the dead body of Haimesh and realizes that he'd been tricked. And all of a sudden, the scene changes, taking us back to when Claire had been hiding under the table, and she gets out from the table, having thought that she had dreamed the whole thing, and from the other side of the room, she hears her husband's voice and hurries toward him, not knowing that she was walking right into the altar. And the demon reveals itself and takes the child, killing her on the spot. And that is how the movie comes to an end. If you want to watch more creepy horror movie recaps, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. We'll see you next time. Bye.